The Nyangani Encounter. Zimbabwe, 1998. The clarion call echoed through the early morning mist. It was 6:30 hours at Camp Delta 9, a temporary forward operating base set up south of the small town of Sanyati, roughly 150 kilometers from Harare, Zimbabwe's capital. The soldiers of Operation Black Fawn rose in formation, their movements precise, disciplined. They were a multinational task force, 28 operators trained for covert reconnaissance and biological threat containment. Among them was Captain Elias Morgan, a veteran from the U.S. Special Forces, known for his stoicism and iron will. Beside him stood Major Carlos Mendez, a Brazilian officer fluent in 6 languages and the mission's intelligence liaison. Their unit was commanded by Lieutenant Richard Hale, a North American officer with cold blue eyes that rarely blinked. The morning seemed routine: breakfast, weapons inspection, and a short briefing, but that peace shattered when the base sirens wailed. Within minutes, the men assembled in the meeting tent. Hale entered, holding a sealed folder stamped classified, Alpha Red. "Gentlemen," Hale began, "you're flying out in 60 minutes. Coordinates, Mount Nyangani. Objective, capture or terminate unknown biological entities. Intel indicates possible extraterrestrial activity, classified under Operation Draco Protocol." The operators exchanged uneasy glances. The name Draco was new, but its implications weren't. Rumors had circulated for years about humanoid reptilian entities operating in remote regions, tied to deep state experiments and ancient myths. They geared up in silence. Their EXO-4/C.E uniforms shimmered faintly, designed for biohazard containment, with integrated OLED wrist trackers linked to orbiting satellites. Their aircraft, a Lockheed C-130 Hercules, was already idling on the tarmac. At 9:30, the Hercules took off, cutting through the Zimbabwean dawn. After an hour and 20 minutes, they reached the drop zone, an open field near the foothills of Mount Nyangani. The jump was rough. They landed in knee-high vegetation, the ground damp, air thick and hot. Parachutes were quickly concealed. A small river glittered nearby under the fierce sun. 2 clicks east, "There's movement," reported Sergeant Duma, a local guide and former Rhodesian tracker. The group advanced cautiously, their body cameras feeding live visuals to a satellite uplink. 4 hours later, they reached a defensible position inside the mountain's lower slopes and formed a perimeter. Hale gathered the men and repeated the mission details. Contact with possible non-human entities. Capture if possible. If not, mark the site for implosion. No civilian exposure. The air grew colder as they ascended deeper into the mountain's terrain. Around midday, they encountered a small band of guerrilla fighters, disheveled, trembling, eyes wide with terror. Through the interpreter, Private Langston, the men recounted their ordeal. "Monsters," one muttered in Shona. "Tall as trees, with eyes like fire, they killed our brothers, ripped them apart." Their group, once 120 strong, had been nearly annihilated. The survivors were dehydrated, too afraid to fetch water from the nearby stream. The soldiers shared their rations and directed them toward the northwest trail, instructing them to flee and stay silent. Night approached. The team advanced into a narrow ravine where the trees grew thick and shadowed. Suddenly, Sergeant Duma froze. Ahead lay the carcass of a cow, bloodless, organs removed, flesh surgically cut with unnatural precision. Captain Morgan knelt. No scavengers. This was recent. 100 meters further, between 2 rocks, they found an unnatural triangular opening, smooth, carved as if by laser. The tunnel extended 6 meters into the rock, its walls glistening like marble. Inside, it opened into a vast cavern lit dimly by shafts of sunlight piercing through cracks above. The operators spread out in triangular formation, 4 to 6 meters apart. Helmet lights flicked on. Then, movement. Through their infrared visors, they saw them. 3 towering beings, 2.5 meters tall, scales glistening yellow-green, eyes slit like serpents. They moved with eerie precision. One stood upright, scanning the cavern like a sentry, while the others dissected corpses, both animals and men, placing the organs into dark metallic cylinders that floated above the ground, gently rotating. Morgan's voice was barely a whisper, "Christ Almighty." The creatures' armor appeared fused to their bodies. One bore a black wrist device, pulsing faintly, organic in texture. They carried sleek staff-like weapons that emitted faint violet glows. The soldiers surrounded them, planting tri-beacon disruptors to isolate the area. But as Private Jensen shifted position, his boots scraped a rock. The nearest creature turned, its pupils constricted. A guttural roar filled the cavern. What followed was chaos. The reptilians moved with blinding speed. Blue beams of concentrated plasma sliced through the air, vaporizing 3 men instantly. The operators returned fire, armor-piercing rounds lighting up the cave like thunder. Major Mendez shouted, "Keep the formation. Aim for the chest." One of the creatures lunged, striking Corporal Reyes with a single blow that shattered his ribs and sent him flying into the rocks. Morgan fired a full burst into the creature's torso, tearing through its armor. It collapsed, convulsing, emitting a hiss that reverberated through their comms. Another alien retaliated, but a grenade detonated near its legs, severing one limb. The third vanished in a shimmer of blue mist, taking with it the floating containers and the mutilated bodies. When the mist cleared, the soldiers realized their grenades had not exploded, they had simply disappeared. The air vibrated with static energy. Extraction. Now. Hale's voice roared through the comms. Moments later, 5 UH-60 Black Hawks thundered overhead, lowering cables into the cavern through a massive hole in the ceiling. The wounded were hoisted first. The lifeless body of the downed reptilian weighed nearly 200 kilograms, it took 4 men to secure it. Captain Morgan examined its remains before the lieutenant ordered him back. The creature's armor was rigid, fused with its flesh, its weapon resembled a metallic gauntlet that wrapped around the arm and pulsed weakly with violet light. It seemed alive. As the last of the team lifted off, distant rumblings echoed across the mountains, jets screamed overhead, and the horizon flashed. Moments later, a series of airstrikes obliterated the cave entrance. Years later, scattered documents from the CIA's Project Stargate referenced an anomalous engagement near Mount Nyangani involving non-terrestrial biological entities, species classified, Draco Royales. All surviving members of Operation Black Fawn were reassigned, their records sealed under national security. Captain Elias Morgan never spoke of Nyangani again, but in his private journal, one line remained underlined. They weren't invaders. They were harvesters.